Okay, and hello everybody, and welcome to our deliverability webinar for Yahoo and Gmail changes that have happened in 2024 and that are going to continue to happen throughout the year. Today we are joined by Goose Digital's Jennifer Pugsley and Mark Finnegan. And yeah, let's get to it. Thank you for joining us. And here we are. So, there's been some changes happening in the email deliverability that's going to impact a lot of B2B and B2C sales, especially in insurance. With us, we have some experts in the industry who are going to talk about the changes. We're going to go into the technical aspects of the changes that are happening and also some of the more creative tips and tricks that you can use to ensure that not only is your email being delivered and not going to spam filters, but that you're actually converting as well. So with us again is Jen Pugsley, VP Customer Success, and she's been doing marketing for over a decade for the insurance industry and, of course, a lot of other industries, but insurance is her specialty. She was once a broker just like me, so we know we've been in it. And we're very lucky to have Mark Finnegan, who is the Director of Marketing and Partnership at Goose Digital. Mark is extremely technical and extremely well-versed in marketing automation. So we call him the whiz kid when it comes to really kind of optimizing and really trying to get the most conversion you can get from segmentation and data through marketing automation. And he works quite a bit with the insurance industry as well. And myself, Tanya Coburn, VP Marketing Communications at Trufla. Of course, my background was in direct writing and the brokerage world until then I moved into marketing about 10 years ago, and here we are. So are we ready to dive into it? Let's do it.
Yes, welcome everyone. Tan, maybe we want to just chat about if you're new to our webinar, then or our sessions, then just feel free to put in questions as they come up. We'll take some short breaks. Feel free to use the chat. We'll do our best to respond during the session, but we definitely welcome questions, feedback, thoughts. We love the participation that we usually receive on these sessions.
Perfect. Okay, so let's dive into the agenda for today. So we have state of email as it is, adopting new proactive email marketing measures, optimizing compliance and engagement, and then we'll leave room for questions at the end and throughout, as Jennifer said.
Awesome. So we're going to get into a bit of the state of email in 2024. As Tanya mentioned, and Mark's going to get into this, is that, it's actually really difficult to land in the inbox. It's not as easy as people think it is. So we're going to kind of go through not only the updates for Google and Yahoo applicable to B2C, which B2B is not far behind, but really kind of broadly, the best practices and what it takes to land in the inbox and kind of stay there. Okay, so this is just kind of a fun quote that we got from our lovely friend ChatGPT, but I think it's actually really applicable how they're saying it. So in 2024, email marketing is like trying to thread a needle in a digital haystack. You got to be sharp or you're just another piece of hay. So you'll see that kind of come together throughout this session, but email is still the number one channel. So the total number of business and consumer emails sent each day is expected to grow from 306 billion in 2020 to over 361 billion in 2024. So it's still highly relevant. I mean, I think we're all feeling the severity and the increase of email. Privacy continues to evolve. So laws surrounding data protection and regulations such as CASL and GDPR continue to make privacy a priority, which is really, really impacting how, again, landing in the inbox and how to do email in 2024 versus previous versus history. And we're still seeing a lot of those legacy ways of doing email still happening today. Reliance on digital communication, I think this is seriously no secret to anybody. It's, since 2020, it's intertwined into our daily lives, from personal to business. I mean, I would think, I was just saying to you, Tanya, the other day, that I wish we could go back to, for school emails and paper. I wish we could go back to paper, right? Everything's in email. So it's just, absolutely quadrupled. So I'm going to pass it over to Mark to really get into some of the technical requirements and considerations that are important moving forward, or important today. They've always been important, but we're going to bring focus to them.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, so there are really kind of four technical records that really need to be considered when you're using any of these email platforms for kind of sending emails in mass. So the four records that you can kind of see here, two are absolutely need to be kind of mandatory in place. I'll break them down all in a second, but that's SPF and DKIM. And then the newest one with some of the updates that Google and Yahoo came out with in February is DMARC. And then the fourth one, which is kind of more optional and nice to have, is that BIMI record there. So breaking down what all of these records are, so SPF is your sender policy framework, which is really just a text record that needs to be in your DNS settings, and it lists all of the servers that are authorized to send emails from that particular domain. So this is something that you would work with either your IT team or whoever really manages your DNS records for the organization to make sure that you have properly in place, whether you're using a platform like Marketing Cloud or HubSpot or Acton or any of their other major platforms. You really want to make sure you have that SPF record in place. The next one is DKIM. So that's Domain Keys Identified Mail. And it's authentication standard used to prevent email spoofing. So really making sure that no other individual or organization is trying to use that email domain on your behalf and use it maliciously. The last one is DMARC. So this is the one that Google really kind of put in place as back in February to really make sure that everyone starts to use this. And this is particularly if you are sending emails to Yahoo and Google domains, and that's really in excess of 5,000 emails to those specific types of domains on a daily basis. So if you feel that your organization is exceeding that, you're emailing either Google or Yahoo email addresses 5,000 times or more a day, you really want to make sure that you have this DMARC record in place. And so what this is domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance. And again, this is another record that you'd be adding to your DNS. And it really just helps make sure that your SPF and DKIM record are in place. And if there's anything that's failing, it's indicating to that domain what to do if that message fails. So really kind of critical to make sure that you get that one in. The next one, so this is BIMI, and this one is going to be something I think that becomes a lot bigger of a deal in the years to come. And a big thing to consider is you have to have DMARC in place. And in order to use BIMI, you also have to have a registered trademark logo. And what this allows you to do is it really kind of standardizes the use of the company logo as a visual indicator to help recipients quickly recognize you as the kind of the sender. So in most places that you would see this is actually typically on your mobile device, where when you receive an email from a kind of a major brand, if you notice their logo is associated there with it, they're probably using BIMI, and it just really kind of helps verify that. So those are the four kind of key records that you want to make sure. Just to be clear, that the two that are absolutely mandatory for sending them are SPF and DKIM. DMARC is now kind of that more additional one that's required now. If you're sending to a lot of kind of B2C emails, you really want to make sure you get that DMARC record in place, whereas BIMI is kind of the more optional, nice to have one.
Mark, quick question on that. So not to put you on the spot here, but just two things that I was thinking about when you were talking is that so for the first two, and I think even DMARC, right, even if you're not kind of going over that 5,000, can you explain like how someone can check if, because a lot of customers still come to Goose today that don't have the correct security settings in place. So can you just tell the audience like how somebody would check if they're using a
Yeah.
HubSpot
So
or
there's a variety of tools. So one that we regularly use to look up these records is mxtoolbox.com. But there are other processes that you can place. So you can always utilize the sending platform that you're using and their support teams to get those records validated as well. So putting in support tickets to teams like HubSpot or Acton or Salesforce, regardless of what platform, they should be able to help you validate if those records are configured correctly. In some cases, it may look right to you, but you would always want to kind of verify with that platform specifically that it's configured the way that they want it to be configured for your emails to really reach all of your recipients.
Okay, and then my last thank you, and then my last kind of thought is that, you know, in a typical fashion at Goose, I mean, we've done these ones so many times, is that like what's our average, or what's the average, right? Assuming your IT is engaged, and we know there's back and forth there, but to get all three in place, what is the frame looking at?
It should honestly not take that much time. You should be able to get all these records set up within a week or less. Really, a couple days, as long as your IT team or whoever's managing those DNS records is really kind of on the ball. So.
Yeah. So I think our biggest message is don't discount DMARC, even if you're not sending the 5,000, per day. I think that's probably the key takeaway, because there's really no disadvantage unless, you've got a point there, Mark. I think there's no disadvantage.
Yeah, no, it's so we typically help customers get onboarded into these platforms, and regardless of Yahoo and Google now kind of mandating that, we have always been putting in DMARC in place in addition to SPF and DKIM. That's always kind of been standard at Goose Digital. So that's where we didn't with this kind of announcement. There was no really major kind of change that we had to make with our customers. So.
Awesome.
Yeah. In terms of the maximizing email deliverability, so there are a bunch of key practices. Obviously, using a professional business email domain is essential. Um, Making sure that you have those technical records set up before you start to send out any emails is really going to be one, making sure that you maximize your deliverability and then maximize your engagement. You really want to be maximizing the amount of opens and clicks you're getting out of the gate to really kind of set up a good email sending reputation for yourselves. Next one is really making sure that you keep a low spam rate. So that was one of Google and Yahoo's key kind of highlights, as well as maintaining a less than 0.3% spam rate. So that's really important, is really making sure that you have really good list hygiene and sending practices. So really kind of coming up with very targeted lists and communications that you're sending to them, and really trying to avoid messages to people that don't necessarily ask for them or is not applicable to them. It's really going to help drive that engagement as well. There are list scrubbing tools that we use. One of the there's a variety of different email tools out there, but really just getting into a regular cadence of scrubbing your list would be highly recommended. So whether you're doing that quarterly or even frankly annually, depending on your list size, something that's really important. The last one is really starting to optimize your emails for mobile devices. So the majority of people are now viewing their emails on mobile devices. So really making sure that your email is mobile responsive is going to help with all of these things as well.
Yeah, I think, Tanya and I talk about this on our previous webinars as well, is that a lot of times these emails, like we kind of just, we're not really putting, we see stuff that comes through doesn't have a lot of thought. And I think that what's starting to happen in the industry is that when things look fragmented, they're not applicable. They just don't look or feel right. It's not relevant to me. It sparks this whole spam, this security, this worry, right? I've even had, even in that kind of like boomer even the boomer demographic, where somebody will send me an email and be like, "Is this spam? Is this spam? Like, this isn't even, and is this somebody trying to hack me?" And I'm like, "No, it's not, probably not." But that's where our minds are starting to go.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Google and Yahoo are really trying to do, is really make sure that the emails that the recipient are receiving are applicable to them, and it's really trying to safeguard them from malicious emails. So that's the idea behind all of these recent updates. So the last major update from Google and Yahoo is really around this one-click unsubscribe. So the one-click unsubscribe, it's again not something that is really new, but it's now being really kind of enforced by Google and Yahoo. So this was actually originally introduced in 2017, and it's officially known as RFC 8058. So this one-click unsubscribes, they're designed so that an email recipient can unsubscribe directly from a mailbox UI. So if you can look at the bottom right corner of my screen there, you can kind of see what that unsubscribe button would look like at the top of a Google or Gmail email. So this is what's kind of in place, in order that the recipient doesn't have to scroll to the bottom of an email to kind of opt out or change their subscription preferences. So most platforms like HubSpot, Salesforce, Pardot, Acton, etc., largely have this automatically in place. If you are unsure if the email platform that you are using today has this one-click unsubscribe automatically configured, that's where I would recommend either contacting that platform provider directly, or you can always kind of reach out to Goose Digital, or maybe a marketing agency that you're working directly with to kind of send out these email communications. But the major platforms should have this already kind of automatically configured. There's nothing the end recipient should really have to worry about in terms of configuration. It should be there. The big thing is making sure that it is absolutely there by June 1st, 2024, so that you are compliant and you're making sure that your emails are always kind of hitting the Google and Yahoo inboxes.
Yeah. So just put June 2024. Okay, so let's just get into preference centers. So kind of what are they, how are they being used? So a preference center is essentially a tool that allows subscribers to customize their email interactions, essentially choosing what type of emails that they want to receive from you. Again, how do you implement these? Usually, again, depending on what kind of email platform you're working with, they'll have kind of like an out-of-box subscription management. Sometimes it's referred to preference center that just needs to be lightly configured, or you can kind of take it even further with a lot of design elements, and types of pop-ups. But they will integrate with your marketing automation platform, enabling all of that selection, and then how that gets segmented back into your list. So we're going to show you an example of one of those. But what are the regulations? So email preference centers require business to respect the choices and comply with the data protection laws. So really, again, the whole point of having it implemented into your marketing automation platform or your email tool is that you're actually complying with what your preferences are, right? You always have, we'll show you an example, but you always have to have that still unsubscribed for all. With Google's and with the new regulations, you can still drive. So just in a flow, right? You can still drive, somebody unsubscribes, you can still drive somebody to the preference center, or like a feedback loop at that point, but they still have to be unsubscribed. So you can't, if that makes sense, and feel free to comment, but you can't actually, before you could unsubscribe, but before that person was unsubscribed, you could go to the preference center. They actually need to be unsubscribed and you can still drive them there, right? So I think the best practice around the full removing that person from the list needs to be, I think it's within 2 business days. Like it has to.
Yep.
Best practices. So when you're thinking about like what to put on your preference center, how many questions you should ask, the level of detail. I think that, again, best practices showing, like, don't ask them several, questions, keep it around the 3 to 5. So this is a very, very simple kind of pared down version. I think what is key to note here is that you'll always kind of want a disclaimer that we are talking about, marketing communications. Okay. Your transactional, whatever's deemed as legal transactional email communications related to policy information or account information will still is not part of this. Those will still be delivered. So here's just a quick example of insurance news, additional coverage, critical climate change notifications. What I think is kind of cool is I've seen brokerages and companies, and we've worked with them to kind of even like, without it being too much text, but to kind of define what you want to say here, right? So if it's insurance news, maybe you're taking that a step further and saying to the public or this certain area, insurance has really changed. Here's what subscribing to our insurance news, here's the types of things that you're going to receive, right? And I think that's really interesting because I think the public, obviously there's a ton of opportunity to educate the public, right? And then obviously you have to provide your opt me out of all communications. So any comments from my team on the preference center? I mean, again, you put your logo on it, you can kind of take it to.
Yeah, I would just say, if you're not using a subscription management center today, the best way to think about it is really, what are all of our different email marketing kind of use cases, and how do we kind of bucket that in terms of a small handful of groups of categories? That's the way that I would kind of best go about it.
Yeah.
It's trying to minimize it so you're not having too many options, but enough that it's not just one option. And if they decide that they don't want that one particular email, you're losing them for all your email communication. So
Yeah.
that's the best way to think about it in my mind.
I think too, so here's some examples of what we talk about in terms of transactional communications versus marketing communications. I think that you can see this list here. We won't go through all of them. But if you're unsure of what's considered a transactional communication, get in touch with your email provider or one of us three on this call, and we can help you determine that. I think that a lot of these email platforms also have a transactional communication specific feature that can be turned on for things like receipt of a new policy or renewal or critical notification, payment or billing, that type of thing. So it's important to investigate what is like an actual transactional communication strategy for email versus everything else. Mark, I
Yeah, I
don't
think
know.
I just wanted to be clear, if we jump back for just a second, is that transactional emails bypass that opt out and preference center, right? So that these are emails that you don't have to worry about having a subscription in place. These are emails typically that you are legally obligated to send, like a customer, right? Where if it's something around a password or a renewal, that's
Yeah.
absolutely, you want to make sure that you can get those emails, so you don't have to worry about that. Just being very clear on, you can't send a marketing related email as a transactional email.
Yeah. Okay, so other considerations. Mark kind of stole the thunder from this slide a little bit, but we're going to chat quickly about best practice with list hygiene. And Tanya, I know you have some tips here. So I've included a link, okay, to a provider called Never Bounce, which is what we use to scrub lists. Just a quick stat, like 30% of emails go bad within just 1 year. So really, really, really important. This is extremely inexpensive. It's very, very quick to do. But it doesn't stop there. So Tanya, it doesn't stop with just the list scrub. Okay, that's part of it. I'd like to get Tanya's opinion here and just talk through some of the things as when she was a marketer, the things that she does on a manual basis.
Yeah, so basically, every quarter we have what's called List Inventory Month. It came from my very early retail days where we close up shop and take a SKU inventory. So we'd look, and it depends on what email marketing system you're using. They're all kind of lead score and pull engagement lists differently. And some of them you can set your criteria in the background of what an engaged contact looks like. But you can start to clear out your list based on have they opened the last 2 or 3 emails. Because what you don't want to do is the algorithm, because of course these Gmail and Yahoo have their own set of algorithms. And when a client stops opening your emails, it's going to start to look like it's spam and it start to get into the spam filter. So that's of course going to impact your, your, what is that, credibility, I guess, as
Yes, your reputation.
your
Yeah.
reputation.
Yeah.
And that's so important. So start to think, don't think of, oh, I'm losing that contact. Think of it as you are impacting my ability to reach other leads or other clients that want to see my email. So I'm going to take you out. And maybe through another subscription list, you might come back in at a different time into my marketing funnel. But right now you're not interested and we don't want you to impact our algorithm. So go through it, look at your top engaged customers, create lists based on engagement as well.
Yeah.
We use HubSpot for our B2B marketing, which does a really good job of telling you cut these contacts out. They're really impacting your score. And yeah, just look at those. We're going to go over your analytics later on, but really be every quarter. Do a big list purge, and don't think of it as, oh, I'm losing a marketing contact. Look at it as if you're gaining more engagement. You're going to be increasing your click-through rate, your open rate, and those are all good things to do.
Yeah, I think it's such an important message. It doesn't matter if it's B2B or B2C. It's critical. And like Tan said, you don't have to delete these contacts. So I see this a lot on the carrier side where, carriers, again, need to send out critical bulletins, and potentially they're not doing that necessarily in a transactional way, right? But the point really is okay, so take stock of that. Who hasn't, like you said, who hasn't opened the last 2-3 emails? You're not deleting them, but park them, put them in another segment, and figure out some level of win back, figure out what that actually looks like to get those people engaged. And again, at minimum, if you have to send a critical bulletin, then that's at minimum, right?
Exactly. And at the very minimum, you should have 2 lists. One is your prospects. So for insurance, those are any leads you weren't able to bind. You still have a whole year under Castle where you can try to warm them up and try to get them on renewal. So we call that the win back drip campaign. And then you have your current clients who you absolutely have to have those mandatory insurance communications, and then the non-mandatory marketing communications. And actually there is a third segment. The third segment is the clients who have canceled. So they were clients, they canceled. You actually have 2 years legally to have them as a content. So you can do a whole 2-year lead nurture campaign win back upon renewal, because you know their renewal. You already know their insurance products. It's really easy to warm them up, do really good quality content to try to win them back as a customer. And you have 2 years, but you have to make sure you're dating your lists and you know when the time is up so you don't get in trouble with Castle.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of these email platforms will notify you. There's a whole automated workflow there, so you don't have to do that yourself. But it's really important. The other thing on this list is if you are acquiring lists, we see this a lot for commercial insurance, and it's still okay. But you've got to be acquiring lists from reputable sources, okay, to ensure compliance. A lot of, we see industry specific associations or trade groups, which are really good. But again, regardless of source, and we'll throw a couple sources that we've used over the years into the final presentation and the recording, but you have to obtain consent. Absolutely. So there's tricks of the trade in terms of obtaining that consent. It's definitely not a lost cause to be acquiring lists. I know Mark probably wants to chime in on a few things here, but the key takeaway is you definitely need consent.
Obtaining consent's a big one, and wherever you're acquiring a list from, I would highly encourage that you're scrubbing that.
Yes.
Really making sure a lot of email addresses that become inactive will be turned into spam traps, and you do not want to be an individual or organization that's hitting those spam traps.
I think one of the things I want to touch on here is, and we kind of did a little bit of this, is that the spam traps are obviously severe, okay, with Google and Yahoo. And I mean, Mark, what is our, for a B2B perspective, what's our limit? It's fairly low. It's not 0.3. It is like the
Yeah,
mandatory.
so the standard across most of these platforms is typically 3% or less.
Yeah.
And then if you hit 5% on any particular send, that's where you're typically getting flagged. You need to kind of walk through with the platform what are your list hygiene and sending practices to show that you're very much not a spammer. Like, these platforms really don't want to be working with email spammers. But yeah, with at Goose Digital specifically, we're always working with our customers to reach really 99% or higher deliverability. So really getting
Yes.
that kind of 1% less or a higher bounce rate. But if you're maintaining all these best practices in terms of segmenting your audience, scrubbing your lists, getting consent, there's no reason why we shouldn't be hitting every single person's inbox.
Yeah, and take it slow. Like, take it slow. If you've got a list that is opted in, and or it's, you don't need to do 2,000 people at a time. Start slow, and if you're unsure, then hit send on a subsegment of that, and then see how that goes and move on. Right.
Right.
I have a question for you, Mark. What is the best way to get someone consent? Like, what are some ideas of how to approach that? Because I always found that a little tricky on my end.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a variety of different ways you could go about it. I mean, in most cases, like, if you're truly kind of acquiring the email address, they've reached out to you in the first place. They filled out a form, whether it was to attend a webinar or download some
For
sort of
sure.
asset from you, maybe get a quote. And it's really being clear right out of that gate. They've given you that implied consent. So whether you have that as a checkbox at the bottom of your form asking for that express consent, that one I always think goes a long way. You can get a lot of people giving you that express consent out of the gate. Otherwise, it's getting them into a drip right away, like an automated drip through one of these email platforms, and really trying to incentivize them on why they should absolutely giving you that express consent. What is the value added of all the different communications that they could be getting, or possible offers that they'd be missing out if they don't give it to you?
For sure. And just to be clear, for personal lines insurance, anytime someone's getting a quote, Castle accepts that as an implied consent because they're doing a transaction with you. So either they're going through your website to get a quote and they give you that email address. You just have to make that opt out very, very, very clear. But what if you are buying lists and you're buying, how do you approach that? Like, what's the best practice when you are, especially B2B, when you are buying a list? So say you're a commercial producer.
So if you're
Yeah.
buying a list in Canada, you technically, with Castle, you do not have permission to send them.
Yeah.
So that is where you need to be reaching out to them through other channels. So
Yes.
LinkedIn, for example, a good LinkedIn strategy of reaching out to them and trying to get them engaged, drive them to a link on a landing page or your website to ask for that express consent, can go a long way. So that would be one tactic. Um, Picking up the phone might not hurt as well, but I think a lot less people are opening or answering their phones these days. So I would lean to probably other kind of social media channels is probably my primary tactic.
One
Yeah.
tactic that I used to love using is you take that list and you use it in your ads. So you kind
Yeah.
of plug it in and you try to offer, and this is where you have to work on good content. Offer up content where they have to plug in their email address to download it, like something that's really valuable. And that way you've warmed them up. They've already gotten a piece of content from you, so you can kind of start that drip process. That's what we used to
Exactly.
do a lot. And it was like
Yeah.
ebooks were crazy at one point, and now it's that's kind of turned into more podcasting. We're seeing the trend towards that kind of marketing, but it's
Yeah,
interesting.
exactly. I think that I was exactly going to say that from an ad perspective. I think that a lot, we're still seeing people purchasing lists, particularly obviously on the commercial side, um, because of that. So it gives them an area of focus, right? So
Mhm.
they can retarget, they can create strategies, which is a really good segue to the next section that you're going to take walk us through, Tanya, is that exactly, it's all about what's that message, what's that offer. Stick it in.
Okay, so this is proactive measures. So my specialty in marketing is content marketing. So what do we do, and how do we ensure that not only is our email being delivered, not only is it avoiding spam filters, but it's being opened and you have a really strong click-through rate. So subject line is the number one important thing to look at, and you want to aim for 50 characters or less. And I want to talk to you about something interesting here, because new research is coming out, because there is generative AI. You have Gemini and ChatGPT. They're saying that marketers who are using ChatGPT for coming up with email marketing subject lines are getting a higher open rate. So if you're not great at subject lines, maybe start with do some AI brainstorming. And I've been looking into Gemini too, and it's pretty good for that. So especially because it's Google powered, so it might give you even better options for Gmail open rates. And something I work really hard on is the pre-header,
Yes.
because you get preview text. So you want to make sure that preview text is like, oh, I need to open this email. So it could be something like in the insurance industry, for example, say it's flood season, it's April, May. You're in an area that might see high flooding. You might want to put, like for your subject, you're at risk for water damage. And then the pre-header is make sure you have overland water coverage to ensure that if anything happens, you're covered. Or it could be something like flood alert in your area. You can get the more specific you
Yes.
can get, the more specific you can get. Flood alert in your area. Pre-header is, please let's review your coverage. There is a high risk alert in your area right now. Now, of course, the insurance people on this call are going to be like, well, there's always an underwriting restriction when it comes to these alerts. Yes, I know that, but you can actually target people who do have that coverage, so that at least they can see that you're building trust with them, that they know that you're there for them. And if you know it's a high risk area, you're gonna know. I know which areas in Calgary are high risk from working there the last decade. I know the area, the postal codes are high risk, and I know if a customer doesn't have coverage, and there's AI that TrueFlow provides that can do that for you. So if you're heading into May, things are starting to melt, be like, hey, it's melting season, and your Calgarians are going to know what that means, and they're going to know they don't have the right coverage, or maybe they need to increase their limits. So be as specific as possible, and that's where that list segmentation is crucial. Okay, guys, don't use emojis. Please don't use emojis in your subject line, and do not use exclamation marks. That's going to hit that spam filter like right away. Don't do it.
One other thing on that is that yes, I mean, it was fun to do the emojis in the subject title, wasn't it? For a bit there, that was super fun. But I one thing that you just kind of sparked my memory is if you have an automated program running and you're setting up a reminder to non-openers, which is a very typical thing to do, you have to change that subject line. Otherwise, it just looks like you are not caring and you're just ripping out a reminder. And yeah, sorry, didn't mean to cut in there, but that you just sparked something there.
Yeah. No, that's a great advice for that workflow trigger. Change this, and you know what? Change the pre-header text. Why not? While you're at it. Email body. I can't tell you how long we look at email body to make sure it's good. Again, that segmentation, make sure you're providing useful content. Don't just go in there with a cold sell. That's never, how many times do you get an email in your inbox or that's like, save 10% on your insurance today? It's not going to convert because switching insurance takes time. So of course, it's going to take time to build that trust with your client. So it could be something like, hey, the Bank of Canada has issued mortgage rates are dropping in late 2024. Here's what you can expect in the real estate market. Something that's cool and useful for people who are currently renting or owning a condo who might be looking into moving in the housing industry. So that's where that list segmentation is really important. Too many images, and this is really important because it looks pretty. The email looks pretty when you have a lot of nice images in there, but when you have too many, it does trigger your spam filters to take over. So you want to balance your text with images and make sure the images that are using are really bright but simple, and go really well with the content. And make sure, and yes, Mark, you've hit on this. Everything you're doing has to be optimized for mobile because that's where you're hitting most of your open rates. So people are checking their email on mobile. So if it's not optimized, you've just ruined trust, and someone's going to hit that spam or just be kind of like, who are you? And personalization. So the more dynamic fields you have, so it could be like, hey, Tanya, your home insurance for your 56 Tuscany Run address is coming up for renewal. Your current deductible is at 2,000, and your sewer backup limit is currently at 30. We recommend, based on the cost of living inflation, that you increase that limit to 50,000. Let's chat. So as dynamic that you can be and targeted that you can be with your content, not only is that going to avoid spam filters, but it is going to get you a higher click-through rate.
If you have anything where you, going back to just your tip about the images, which I think is so important, for spam filters, for dark mode, for so many different reasons, I think if you have something and you're running a campaign where you are in a situation where you do want your image heavy, whatever that looks like, there's an infographic, there's a whatever, like these platforms have landing pages built into them for a reason, and utilize them, right? Utilize them as much as you can, but don't try to jam everything into an email, right?
That's great advice. That, like, doing like a teaser image and then a read more and then linking to a landing page where you can have GIF animations for something like an illustration you're trying to come across is great. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's really great advice. A big one is you need to proofread your emails because they're really coming hard on misspellings or typos, because a lot of the phishing emails that you're seeing are done out of Russia and China, and so it's ESL. So that's what they're like. They're saying, oh, this could be a phishing email. We're going to hit it into spam. We've all had those emails. And if you do any cyber training at your workplace, that's the first thing you look for when you know it's a scam or spelling error. So those spam filters will catch it. Something that a lot of people kind of overlook for time, like I know we're all really busy, that I think should be a common practice is A/B testing is really important.
Yeah.
So it could be as simple as changing where that call to action button is or the color of that call to action. So I would definitely consider experimenting with that. And my biggest thing, and my team is so tired of hearing this from me, the call to action has to be above the fold. I don't care.
Yeah.
It has to, they shouldn't have to scroll down to hit a call to action on a phone. So it always has to be right there in your face, and it should be a couple times within the email, whether it's text or a button call to action. And you'll see it. Experiment with A/B testing, and most email marketing platforms will tell you where they click the most in what area in your email, so you can kind of examine that as well.
Yeah, so I really like the call it on A/B testing. I think what you could also highlight is A/B testing around not just content, but also your day of the week and time of day sending. That's a big one too, to help with maximizing kind of your open rates and engagement as well. Some of these platforms also have tools like adaptive sending, which will really learn when the recipient's most likely to open and engage with an email and actually send it to them at that specific time. So that's something to consider as well.
100%. That's a really good point. I do that too with my social media posts. So yeah, time of day is very important. Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about metrics. I get asked this a lot when I'm talking to brokers. What's a good open rate, or what's a good click rate or click through rate? And it really varies. So I'm just going to go over what these metrics mean. Mark, I know you look at the data all the time, so please jump in. Open rates kind of tells you kind of what your subscriber interest is. If it's that's your good gauge, and every industry has a different benchmark. So for what I do for B2B is a different benchmark than insurance has, B2C, than what retail has. So it's kind of important to, and I know, Mark, this is controversial because I know you don't like benchmarking, but we'll get into that. CTRs is your click-through rate, and that's really important. So click-through rate is how many people have clicked on something in that email, and there's two different types of ways to measure it, which we'll get into. So engagement goes beyond click rate. It's a more accurate way of telling whether people are engaged, and that's if people. So the click-through rate is whoever has opened your email is clicking in that email, and that's more for me an effective way of looking at engagement. And conversion is whatever that call to action might have been in the email was taking place, whether it's join a subscriber list or join a webinar or get a quote, whatever you deem to be a conversion is your conversion rate.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I know what Mark, because we've been together for 8 years, I know what Mark's going to say, but I feel like it's moving, and I love this because we have to move away from solely looking at open and click rates. It's
Yes.
about what is this total engagement? What is the goal of the email or the automated program or the campaign as a whole? And what is the goal of that segment? So it's all about, and Mark will probably comment here on bots with open rates. So we have to move beyond open rates. We see still a lot of companies putting lead scoring on open rates, and really that shouldn't be. It's a good first. It's like a good first base, like Tanya's put here. But we have to look at email KPIs as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. So, yeah, to me, like industry benchmarks in terms of like open rates and click through rates, I think it's a good reference point. But like no two organizations' audiences are the same, right? And so, to me, you may be able to far exceed what the industry average is, or if you're really just getting started with email marketing, you may need to set kind of more realistic kind of benchmarks. So that's where I kind of lean away from those industry benchmarks as you kind of mentioned, Hanya. But to me, it's really getting an understanding of, do we have any historical data to work with and kind of be setting our own benchmarks and goals, or are we kind of starting from scratch? And then, like Jen said, it's really kind of understanding today that we have a lot of bot activity that is either kind of scanning these emails and checking all of these links, or there are things like Apple Privacy Mail, which if the end recipient has that enabled, it's going to look like a false open in kind of in your email data. So that's where it's really kind of starting to move away of really kind of trying to prioritize that open rate as a huge metric, and then what is our ultimate goal of trying to get them to register for a webinar, request a quote, renew their policy, you kind of name it. Really emphasizing our measuring on campaign performance on those kind of next actions rather than measuring it on like an email open.
I think one of the steps, so one thing just to point out here, and we didn't evolve this into a slide, but one of the things that you can do, a tip in terms of measuring your effectiveness of your campaign back to that original email campaign, is implementing proper tracking and scoring, right? So one of the aside from those steps that we showed, but you can then see, hey, wait a sec, if I'm trying to promote a new product, or I'm trying to make my audience aware that you can now buy travel insurance through our app, right? Start tracking all of the assets, if you will, associated with that campaign. So everything from the little mini video that you might have to the landing page to the app itself. And then you can start to paint this picture of this email campaign. It is driving this level of engagement. If that makes sense.
So, Jen, when you say tracking, I've worked with brokers, and tracking is not a strong suit because a lot of them don't know the tools or understand or have even the lead management tools to say which campaign was successful. For someone who maybe doesn't have a HubSpot, how would you track these different marketing pieces that are going out?
Yeah, so I might need some Mark participation in here. I think the reality is that without a lot of these, that's one of the strongest use cases of marketing automation is visibility. right? So you can throw a Google, Google Analytics tracker. It's only going to go so far. But that's one of the number one use cases of marketing automation, is that full end-to-end campaign tracking.
Yeah, exactly. That is the benefit of these marketing automation tools, is that full visibility. If you don't have one of these platforms in place, it's looking at, okay, well, what are the key elements that we can clearly kind of track back, right? So to me, it would be, like I said, specifically for if we drove a whole bunch of prospects to a specific form on your page, how many people actually filled out that form? That's something that we should be able to quickly get from your website, and specifically that form. How many people actually requested a quote? All those kind of things should be something that we should be able to measure outside of just these platforms. But it'd be really kind of working with you to understand what do we actually have the ability to capture, and ultimately kind of report on if we're not using some of the tools that you see here.
Yeah, like there's a way to link it together, probably with the Zapier and a bunch of other things. I mean, quite honestly, I don't think we've ever operated without we've never really operated without like multi-channel attribution, which is really what we're talking about here. First touch all the way to what was, multi-touch attribution. I think, regardless if it was that second, third video that we think was really the conversion point. I think we from day one adopted marketing automation for that reason, right? But exactly what Mark said, I think if you don't have a platform today and you're looking to piece together those steps, then certainly give one of us three a call.
For sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. And these are some platforms that we've used and we recommend and there's pros and cons for each one. But again, I think Goose would probably be the best person to contact if you are looking to switch your marketing automation or going onto a marketing automation platform for your email marketing. And I do want to say, as a marketer, email marketing is still one of the number one ways to get ahead of either your potential clients or your current clients. It's still the most valuable way to communicate to your audience. So yes, it's becoming a lot more work and there's a lot more tricks to it. But to me, there's no way I would have any type of marketing department without email marketing. Of course, you support it with content marketing, organic content marketing, ads, and SEO and all of that, but that's your direct to customer. You have their attention in that email when done correctly.
And you're not paying for it. I mean, you're paying for it in some form or another, but you're not paying for it in the same way that you're paying for ads. So
it's tenable. Ads are untenable. They get to a point, especially insurance. They have their use at certain points in the customer journey, but you can't solely, and I've seen companies solely rely on ads and not do anything like organic content marketing. And that's a huge mistake because it's not like your cost, your return on investment, your return on ad spend is astronomical when you're not supporting it with more organic ways of marketing.
Yeah, 100%. You shouldn't even buy a lead if you're not willing to further communicate to that lead through other digital mediums like marketing or like email and retargeting. But that's another webinar.
So that brings us to the conclusion. I do want to spend a minute talking about Goose Digital because they were the brains behind this email marketing deliverability. They know their stuff. I always come to Jen for advice when I am working with other brokers to kind of see what the best practices are at staying afresh for the insurance industry. So yeah, I do. Like if you want help, whether it's, oh my gosh, I'm talking for you, Jen. Why don't you talk a little bit?
No, it's okay. No, yeah, we're I think the slide shows it. We're a full service digital marketing agency. I appreciate Tanya so much. I think that feel free to reach out. We help companies from largely on digital marketing services and execution. We do have the ability to bring in technology, but we are not an insurtech like Trufla. So we are a service company, but we do have the ability to operate that technology on behalf of our customers correctly. I think is a big win. Yeah. So I think one of the things we didn't really, I'll leave this to you, Tam, but I think one of the things we didn't really we called it out, but this all hinges on the data that you have.
On the data.
All
And
the,
that,
yeah, go ahead. You go ahead. Yeah.
look, when I was doing marketing for Sharp and Rogers, now Acera, the access to data was the most challenging piece of my job. So I felt like I couldn't do it properly, or I felt like I couldn't get the whole holistic way of how I really wanted to do my content marketing because I
Yeah.
couldn't segment properly and I couldn't get those dynamic fields the way I wanted to. And yes, Trufla does have a solution. I am going to talk about it because if there's anything you can take away about True Mobile, it's the access to your customer data where you can actually, I don't know if you can see on my screen, on the left hand side of the computer screen, all those grayed out areas are dynamic fields for one client email. So you can really target any aspect of a person's policy and build a campaign that's automated, and it takes 2 minutes. You can also build your retention renewal campaigns because you can see if people's, you can just see in like a 1 second report whose premium has increased year over year and kind of like get on top of it through automated email marketing campaigns.
Exactly.
So I really do wish I had this when I was doing marketing for insurance companies. Again, this is the best access you have to data. And I'm not just saying this because I work for Trufla. I've been there. I know the other products that are out there. So even if you are using another email marketing system, you're not using ours, the data that powers this, if you use that to segment your lists and use it in SharpSpring or use it in HubSpot and use it in Salesforce, that alone is so powerful. And I highly recommend.
I think that's actually a really good point to leave off the webinar with, is that that's one of the biggest things that certainly Goose appreciates about the Trufla platform and the data structure is that it's so flexible. So you can hand that over to a, hand it over literally, but you can, an agency or a digital marketer can actually go and build those successful campaigns because the data is so accessible versus some of the other legacy insurance technology that's been around for many, many moons, that doesn't have such a nice data structure to work with. It's possible, but it's cumbersome, and it's yeah.
Just
So
type. Okay.
we don't really have, we have about 2 minutes. I don't know if anyone wants to throw anything up. There's a lot that we covered there.
Was this helpful for people to see what's coming up and kind of learn some of the tips and tricks of email marketing?
We hope
It's okay,
so.
you don't have to. It's always that like awkward time when it's.
We'll definitely throw up our we'll add a couple more links in the final recording so you guys have some, like the MX toolbox and some of the other things that we kind of touched on. And yeah, we'll keep you posted on some of the, hopefully, I mean, there's only going to be more, but we'll keep you posted closer to June on how more changes with Google and Yahoo roll out.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark, for being our special guest and
Yeah.
your expertise. We really appreciate it. It's really nice to have that like very technical perspective.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having us.
Amazing. Okay. Well, that's it from us. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. And I'm sure Jen and I will come back in a month or two with another webinar. And if you have any marketing topics you want us to cover, let us know either on LinkedIn or in this chat, and we'll work that out for you guys. Thanks again. Take care,
Take care,
everybody.
everyone.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Bye.